Words by Entity 9 Silvergen. Chapter 2. Not Enough. When Thomas was in 8th grade, one of his teachers said something that made Deceit fall even more in love with words. She said that English was one of the hardest languages to learn because there were so many synonyms. Words all had different meanings, but some of them had the same meanings. Even then, there were slight differences that set them apart from each other and gave them a whole new meaning. They were so incredibly small, almost unnoticeable, and near impossible to memorize. Deceit found them fascinating. For example, anger. Anger meant many things. Technically, annoyance fell under anger by definition, but the two were almost never associated with each other. Anger was on a whole different level than annoyance. Annoyance was nothing compared to anger. The same applied to fury, but in the opposite direction. When Deceit thought of fury, he thought of destruction. Mindless chaos in a fit of rage, wrath threatening to bubble to the surface and take over, a rampage of boiling heat. Still anger, but something so much more. Each word was a spectrum. If anger was the center, annoyance fell on one end and fury fell on the other, with 1,000 more words in between. Honing in on the slight differences, they could be molded together to perfectly express one's emotion. But Deceit wasn't angry. He was sad, but sad wasn't a powerful enough word. Anguish, agony, despair, distress, misery, heartbreak, even those words weren't enough. For a language with such a wide range of words, it always upset Deceit when he couldn't find words to articulate his thoughts. English was just so limited. It shouldn't be, but it was. Like, how could he describe what it felt like to sink out? He could probably make some bizarre noises and wild gesticulations, and another side would understand him, but only because they'd experienced it, just like he had. He didn't have any idea how to describe it with words to someone who had never done it. Sometimes he tried to describe what it felt like to rise up. It came up in conversation often enough, with dark sides unable to do it properly and all. But Deceit could never manage to show how he felt. Virgil got close a few times, but words like sick and nauseating just fell short somehow. He couldn't remember sinking out of Thomas's living room, and he didn't know why he tried to rise up, but he did, and he couldn't find it in himself to regret it, not with so many emotions churning in his chest. Emotions were tricky. Sometimes they were simple, but sometimes not. Sometimes words weren't enough. Deceit hated these moments when crude, messy noises formed in his throat and sobs escaped his lips. Dizzy and unstable from rising up, Deceit couldn't throw himself onto his bed fast enough. In the back of his mind, he was aware he'd returned to his room, but the room's comforting aura failed to soothe him in the slightest. Deceit leaned over his bed, feet still on the ground, like he couldn't decide if he wanted to remain composed and stand or curl up in the safety of his blankets. He grasped his sheets in gloved fingers and held onto them like a lifeline, burying his face into the soft blankets as if he were hiding. He wasn't sure when he started crying. The tears were spilling from his eyes and he couldn't stop it. Why was he crying? It wasn't like Thomas never rejected him before. Deceit was always carefully attuned to the meaning behind whatever someone was saying. It made words directed at him all the more meaningful. That, combined with the fact it was Thomas, the host was everything to a side. It hurt. It hurt in ways Deceit couldn't explain, and somehow that made it hurt more. It didn't matter, though. It wasn't like there was anyone to listen if he did know how to explain it. He was alone. Alone with his stupid, wordless